In this video, we're going to take a look at a currently non-documented way to refresh Azure Managed Application permissions without having to redeploy the application if the publisher changes those permissions, and also using the Managed Application App Identity, which is well documented. So we'll take a look at those two things in a specific scenario. So I'm right now looking as the publisher, and I'm seeing I have a customer deployed a managed application inside of this resource group. So as a publisher, I can do a get on this managed application, and I can see my authorization is the owner right now because that's how we published it. And I can see the identity that was assigned to it. It's a system assigned identity to the managed application. If you remember from previous videos, we had this enabled there, and we are able to see some properties and information about it. What else can we do as the publisher? What we can do is we are able to do a GET request um, on that resource. As a publisher, we can do a GET request on the resource representing the managed application from our side and get back that information. So as an example right here is that GET request. As you can see right here, Azure CLI tool using the REST method with GET, and we're passing it the subscriptions, the end customer subscription resource group where the customer's application is deployed. How do we know this? If you remember from previous videos, you can capture this information from the webhook, for example, or just by seeing it in the Managed Application Center, and then the API version for this resource provider right there, and output in JSON. And what we get back is information about the application. Convenient thing here is knowing the tenant ID of the managed identity of the application. That's convenient. We can see which plan it is, right? So we can do some automation regarding that. We can see the principal ID and the role definition. And if we take this role definition and search online, we would be able to find um, that this is built in. Let's see if it's one of the built-in roles. And I think that's going to be the owner role. As you can see, it corresponds to the owner role. So that is how the publisher can access the managed application, get some information back. Billing details, resource ID, that's for billing. You can see who created the application, the customer support info, which is the resource group, what were the outputs of the application, publisher, tenant, support URLs. Okay, let's say we wanted to make a change to this authorization and make this application make the publisher only have contributor role. Or for example, we start with contributor and we want it to be an owner now, right? So we would go to the partner center, pick the application, go to the plan definitions, and we'll find the spot where we are actually configured it. So I think let's swap it from this to this. And you can see, by the way, this is the principal ID, the group to which the permission is given. It comes from here. So let's do this. Save draft, review and publish. Put a little note explaining that this is not going to be published live. And let's push it. So when we push this change will take some time to apply, right? We see, if you remember correctly, it will flow through all this. But then, even once it gets here, this application that is already deployed has an owner access. So how do we refresh the permissions, right, for already deployed application without having the customer redeploy it? Let's say we made a change. We need it to be contributor. Now we need to be owner because we need to be able to assign permissions like we saw with the AKS examples. Contributor would not be good enough. So what could we do? We can wait for the replication to finish and then execute a command that is inside of this sample repo right here, an undocumented for now command called refresh permissions. Okay, and we would do it would be a post call to the managed application with the right version number. So let's wait for the replication to finish, and then we'll test this command and see how it reflects. And when I say that the command is not documented, I don't mean it's completely undocumented, but there's not good document describing how to use it. You can clearly see it in this document role-based access control. There is that refresh permission um, option there. So we submitted the update, and it's still going. But let's, in any case, try to do this post to refresh the permissions. So I copy this command here. So we did the request to the managed application, refresh permissions. Right here is the actual action. Okay, and now let's do a get against that application. So I have the command right here. And very convenient to use AZ REST because don't need to pass the tokens. Can do the same thing with curl, but need to pass the token or other things. I like using Azure REST for this purpose. It's convenient. And then let's see what we got. Oops, we need to put it as a JSON payload. And let's see what we got and if things changed. Yes, it looks like they did. This is now a different GUID than we saw before. And this GUID is assigned to this same principal, and this GUID is not an owner anymore. I think it is a contributor. So let's take a look at the authorization. And lo and behold, right there, this is now a contributor. So by making a change to the application and submitting it, then we can call refresh permissions to update these permissions for the application. Okay, so that is what the refresh permissions, and this is what this section in this little uh, place I want to show you. We're going to take a look at two more things. One is how to use some of this refresh permission capability and customer allowed actions to allow us to do some VNet peering, right? So it's a common question. Well, I have a locked resource group. I'm going to dive right into that part. So let's say this is my virtual network right here. Let's say I want to peer this virtual network. So I'm going to go, I'm a customer. I see this and I want to do peer and I want to add a peering. So it's going to be peer A, peer remote. So this is going to be peer local. Okay, and I want to do a peer, and I'm going to peer it, let's say, to this other virtual network and say add. Boom. I'm not able to successfully do this because even though I have permissions to do that, it says that there is a deny assignment right here to my local virtual network. So the customer cannot do peering now. So what can we do to make this possible? If we go to the plan definition, and say we published it, forgot we needed that capability. So we are trying to get here and we see customize allowed actions. This section is by default we have a read action, but we want to allow customer to do peering. So let's see what actions do we need. We need to put them separated by semicolons. So searched online, virtual net peering permissions. We need a few permissions. Let's give it a shot. We're not going to do classic, so we're just going to take this permission. We're going to take this permission. We're going to take this permission. Read we already have. So let's take the And maybe for completeness sake, we don't need the read. So we did that, and then we already have contributor. Let's swap it back to owner just for fun, and then review and publish. We'll push this change. So the update is going. Let's run a refresh permissions call. Let's run the get call and see if it refreshed. It looks like it did. Let's go inside of the application as a publisher and look at the authorizations. Oh, we're owner now again because we swapped it. So let's see if the peering will work now or not. Let's look closely at those error messages we got to see if they're the same. Ah, so the error message is very different now. Cannot be created because their address spaces overlap. And before we were getting a denied assignment error. So let's find another network that's not overlapping and try peering. So I selected another virtual network to create the peering. And the peering, as we see, with my locked, oops, resource group. This is the locked resource group, managed resource group. I, as a customer, was able to create peering between one VNet and some VNet somewhere else because, like, the main reason why it was possible is because the provider, the publisher, added some action. So what is nice, why these 2 points are connected is, let's say you forgot to provide the customized actions for certain things. You already published the app, and you then need to, you say, I need to provide some actions that may be more and more inside of this box. You can do that, and then using the refresh permissions call, this post method that we used, we can refresh it, right? Let's see this post method right here of refresh permissions. We're able to refresh those permissions without customer having to redeploy. So it's super convenient and related to each other. And the next part that we wanted to look at is this last tidbit here of get managed application identity. So if you remember in the previous videos, we looked at the pod identity and the node identity, but there is a way to have an identity assigned to the managed application itself. And we actually did that in our create UI definition. If you remember, we included a managed identity selector with always on for the system assigned identity. And therefore, when our managed app got created, it has, as a customer, I can see the managed identity created for this app. But how do I use this identity? The idea with the managed identity of the nodes was that it can be used from inside of those VMs without publisher having to log in, right? In this case, to use this identity, I need to use publisher permissions, publisher login, right, or automation that's running in the context of the publisher. And then I can ask this app to give me the token for this identity. So if I'm running a SaaS, hybrid SaaS, let's say managed app together with some SaaS endpoint on my end, I'm able to use this managed identity to do things. So how does that work? In this document, it describes how to enable it. And then on the very bottom, it describes how to get the identity token out of the endpoint as a publisher, right? So I need to be logged in as a publisher. So let's simulate this, and then we'll give an example of how to access storage, for example, from my control plane on behalf of this managed app. So let's see. So in our little sample repo, we can grab this command. I guess this command is right here. Let's see. It's right over here, in the bottom of this README file. We're going to do a post to the ID of the managed app, as we saw with refresh, and we're going to call the list tokens call. We're going to give it then the body, the authorization audience. How again? How do we know? It's documented right over here, authorization audience. And if we had user assigned identities, we'll specify that. But in our case, we're using the system assigned identity. So let's see how we can grab the token as a publisher. So in this command prompt, I'm logged in as the publisher. Let me go grab the managed app ID, resource ID right here. And let's just swap it out right here. Okay, for the list token commands. And let's run this command. Okay, so we got ourselves an access token. And if we decode this access token, we will see that it's basically attached to this ID. So what can we do with this access token? Let's play this following scenario. Let's say I'm a customer and I have a managed app, and I want to provide this managed app access to my storage account. So I have a ADLS Gen 2 storage account. I'm going to go, it's outside of the managed app, and I'm going to add a role assignment. I'm going to make this storage data reader, blob data reader, and I'm going to assign it to this identity, the managed app identity, and save it. Okay, so now I should be able to use this token to access no matter where I am, right? This token I obtained using my publisher credential by making this call. And this call was specific to a given customer of mine with their managed app name. I got the token, and now using this token from inside of the app or from the outside of the app, I'm going to be able to access that storage account. So let's see if it works. I'm just going to grab this access command, and I'm just going to run it from my Windows box, paste it here, copy the bearer token into the header, and I'm going to say list for me the files inside of that storage container file system. Let's see. And we can see right there, I got successful response, and it's telling me there is a directory 2, there is also a subdirectory 1, and there is a t1.csv. So if I modify the command a tiny bit, let's modify the command a tiny bit and say, show me what's inside of t1.csv, and see if this command works. And we are able to read that data. So again, just to recap, what we did is we have a managed application, and the managed application has a system assigned identity. We are, as a publisher, able to make a post call to list tokens, provide the scope or the resource for which the tokens are issued. In this case, for storage, I could have been for management, Azure Cam, and then using that token, I can access things. Which things can I access outside of the resource group, whatever the customer was assigning? So this is representing, this right here is representing my managed app. They assigned it to my managed app. And if they unassign it, then after some time, my calls, right now it will still work, but after some time, the calls will stop working because the permission is removed. So the customer is able to give me access as a publisher to stuff that is outside of the managed resource group. So that's basically it for these series of videos on managed app. and AKS and some of the identity topics. Hopefully it was useful. Thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.